had an old picture. Hey, thank you very much for being here so early in the morning at breakfast. We had a pretty packed program here this morning, and so thank you again for being here. I wanted to, we're going to cover mostly history and a little bit about where the Water Congress is going. And so we'll have a short slide deck here, but just a little reflection back to the history. We started this organization, Colorado Water Congress, our charter was actually signed in 1958. So that makes it 60 years this year. And we did annual conferences and continue to do them since that time. But we started doing summer conferences in 1976. And the very first one we did was in conjunction with Western State College. The water workshop that they've been doing actually started out as a co-event that Dick Bratton had. The idea was to do it as a joint event. The conference was 2 weeks long. And it was in the afternoons. It went from 1:30 to 4:30 every day, Monday through Friday, for 2 weeks at Western State College. In 1980, when we, actually the very next year we broke off, we decided to do our own conference, probably because it was too long. And in 1980, we had 43 people at our conference. And this year, I think last numbers I saw from Meg were around 350. So way huge record for us. So we're really thrilled about that. I've got a few slides to run through, and I've got two images in my years with the Water Congress, and we're starting to pay a lot more attention to visual imagery. But I have two images that are really my favorite of all time. Does anybody recognize any of the three people there in that picture? Yeah, so you recognize Steve McNichols. This organization was created with funds from Steve McNichols' executive funds that he had. The person to his left, I guess that's our left, is Duke Dunbar. Check out the shoes. Travis, you need some of those. Duke Dunbar was our longest serving, and still is our longest serving Attorney General. He was, I think, there for about 23 years. And to the far right, and right over there is John Bernard Jr., who was actually an employee of the Attorney General's office. So he was on this Duke Dunbar's staff. And what they're handing out there are membership cards 1 and 2. Back in the 50s and 60s, we were really big on having little membership cards, and they have your little number on there and stuff, so you have your card. So for the first 2 years, this organization was actually housed in the Attorney General's office. And if you think about that for a minute, we're a nonprofit corporation, and today it's almost impossible to imagine a staff person running a nonprofit corporation inside the Attorney General's office. John Bernard Jr. left not short the AG's office to start his own business not very long after this photo was taken. Unfortunately, he actually passed away at a fairly young age. But as he was moving over to start his private practice, he basically took the Colorado Water Congress with him and remained the executive director for about a year, and then came back and said, I don't have time for this. And so he happened to run into another person by the name of Gordon Shear, who happened to have an office there in the same building. Gordon Shear was running the Colorado CPA Association, itself a fairly young association, part-time. And Gordon had retired from the FBI. And he said, look, I've got this offered as a full-time gig in California to run the California CPA Association, but I really want to stay in Colorado. And so John Bernard Jr. and him got to talking, and they said, how about you run the Colorado Water Congress part-time and the CPA Association part-time? So the organization then left John Bernard Jr.'s office and was housed for the next 10 years in the offices of the Colorado CPA Association. And at that time, now the CPA Association, I think like 25 employees. It's really grown quite a bit. And they actually have named the conference room after him. But for the first 10, after John Bernard Jr. ran the organization for a couple of years, the next person, Gordon Shear, ran it for about 11 or 12, but he was a CPA. And most of what he did during that time, a lot of what he did was getting our newsletter started back when everybody remember what a mimeograph machine is? Back in those days, your membership was $5 in the Colorado Water Congress, and you got your monthly newsletter written first by a retired, I keep getting these mixed up. One was a retired Bureau employee, and one was a retired Denver Water employee, one Charles Fisk and one Charles Feast. And they did our newsletter. That was about 8 pages long, and you know, it was one of those things when you like looked forward to getting a newsletter in the mail. It was like, wow, this is really great. And so they would mimeograph those newsletters with the help of the CPA Association, and then mail those out. And we just kind of borrowed their staff or rented their staff to do that. The next, one of the things that we first did. The people that created the Water Congress, the very first meeting we had was in June 4th of 1958. It was held in Denver. And it was this concept idea of, should we create a statewide association? Most of the other states have an association somewhat like, have a state association. We don't really have one here in Colorado. And so there was this feeling, and several things happened simultaneously. The governor had gone to Washington, D.C. to testify. Governor McNichols had gone to Washington, D.C. to testify about the importance. This was back in the 1956-57, when we were all scrambling to get federal funding for major projects. And he went and said, he was testifying in front of Congress. He said, I'm here to tell you we have total statewide support for these projects that are being funded here. And unbeknownst to him, another panel came up from Colorado right after them and said, that's not really right. We don't like this project. And so he came back hopping mad, pretty embarrassed, and in front of a congressional committee and said, we need to get an organization that can speak with one voice on behalf of the water community of this organization. About the same time, and you know, there was a lot of concern at the time about the filling criteria for Lake Powell, and California had a lot of presence on that, and we were very concerned about what that would do to the compact and our ability to operate therein. And so there was a lot of concern here in the state about what is it that we need to have a strong presence on that. Also about the same time, at a national, what's now the National Water Resources Association, a number of our attorneys got together and said, there's a lot of stuff we disagree on. We spend a lot of time fighting over water issues, but we really need to think about those things that we agree on. And so let's create an association. So what would that association do? And this is what we did at that very first meeting, and we used to have this posted on our website, probably need to do it again. We developed a platform, and so there's about a 7 or 8 page document. We're going to go through a few excerpts from that platform. The first one was, who would the members of this organization be? And it was this thing about that the members ought to be those whose livelihood really depends on the development and use of Colorado's water resources. So that's pretty broad definition. It's everybody that either owns water rights, that deals with the administration of it, the planning, et cetera, for Colorado's water. There was, at that time, a lot of frustration and lament about the continental divide serving as a psychological barrier. There's this idea that we needed to have an association that was really unified. And this was not really a happy group either. It was real satisfied with the status quo. And I love this quote in here about that we need to abandon our past leisurely attention and consideration of our water problems and adopt the strongest state water program. And I think at that time, in today's vernacular, you would think of that as a water plan. They really thought that it was important to have a forward-looking program, a policy that had complete internal harmony within the whole state. And we all talk about collaboration as though that's a new and hip word. And you know, they really thought that there needed to be this collaboration and a better working relationship between the people of Colorado, and that they really mean you. And this importance of having a strong working relationship with the State Water Conservation Board, federal bureaus and agencies, and that members of the state legislature. So there again, the importance of that we have a very good connection there, and that the policies that get developed have wide support. And the thing that they really wanted to focus on was this idea of having a very intimate and close relationship between the Colorado Water Conservation Board and those connected with water development all around the state. At the time, this was prior to Felix Sparks coming on at CWCB. The CWCB had gone through kind of this period of malaise after its initial creation in the late 1930s, and they were having like 1 or 2 meetings a year. Their staff was way underpaid. They didn't have enough staff to really even just do basic functioning, and there was a lot of frustration there within this organization, the people in the water community at that time, that the CWCB did not have an adequate presence for the state water policy agency of the state of Colorado. And that frustration was expressed in a white paper that we did essentially at the same time. It was about a 5-page paper on what we felt needed to happen at the CWCB. And one of them was that they needed to increase their staff, and the other one was that they needed to pay them a fair wage in order to retain the staff. This is before 1969, the Water Rights Administration Act. And the frustration at that time of the state of our water laws, saying that the piecemeal legislation of nearly 75 years has created a mechanical monstrosity. That's our statutes. They're saying this was official position of this organization, was that our statutes were a mechanical monstrosity which even the ingenuity of competent state officials can no longer use to protect water users in the exercise of their lawful water rights. Holy cow. That's a pretty strong statement. And in 1965, a few years later, they took a serious cut at that, and then again came back at it real seriously with the 69 Act. That then had to be was modified several times, especially in 71. So again, this was not people that were happy with the status quo. They also felt that there needed to be, and how many times have you heard David Robbins say this, that we need to have a continuous review and appraisal of our position with respect to current and pending interstate water matters, but we need to really take full advantage of local participation in that process. But there again, the importance in our focus that we spend on just continuously evaluating and reevaluating where we stand in our position with interstate water matters, and that's coming up again. We go through these cycles. I put this in red not because I was angry, but I just wanted to really make this point. The one thing that they said in the platform was the very first thing this organization should do is make sure that the public has an ample opportunity to become more informed of the relationship between the state's future agricultural and economic development, ag and economic development, and its dependence upon Colorado's water resources. They had gone on to say that the CWCB should be in charge of this, and there should be a significant effort to educate the public on water. And how long was it later? I mean, before we got to creation of Colorado Foundation for Water Education. But the idea back then, when that was the first order of business of this organization, was to keep the importance of water alive in the public's mind. We talk a lot about funding, and they were talking a lot about funding back then too. And this idea that the state must take a more realistic view of our modern competitive society. It's pretty interesting, you know. And you listen to people now when you're in D.C. or wherever you go, we need money, and their response is, well, everybody wants money, but we need to substantially increase appropriations for what they called an all-out water program. That's, you'd probably call that funding for our water projects today. So back then we were still very concerned about that. There was also concern about that this kind of funding sources needed to be created, and it needed to be protected. Now, one of the big issues that we've had with severance tax, and we lost initially over $200 million of our severance tax that was earmarked for water that went in to balance the state's budget. So there's still these ongoing issues of adequate funding. This last photo is another one of my favorites. I think everybody recognized Sam Maines, Reka Gosick, and Christine Arbogast, but kind of this. They may have been pointing the way to the bathroom, but I think they were kind of pointing to the future. There's this image of that far-looking and where we're heading for the future, I think, is something that we need to continue to focus on. So when we're talking about where the Water Congress is going, let's talk about at the federal level. You know, we've been working on endangered species issues, especially on the Colorado River, for decades and decades, and I think for the first time now we've got a real issue here with the OMB, and we've used well over $250 million of hydropower revenues to fund the Colorado River Recovery Program, and that's in danger right now. And so it's going to take some effort to try to keep, as Andy mentioned yesterday, that's the most serious thing I can remember in my career here as a threat to that program, so we're going to have to keep an eye on that. Those of you that heard Tim Quinn talk about forest health, boy, if you told me 10 years ago that a lot of our municipal water providers and other small providers a lot of them would have forest people on their staff, it's just incredible. California's got this. Forest health is one of their top issues. It's everywhere we go. The meeting on Wednesday morning was extremely well attended. So we're going to continue to talk about this idea of creating a loose alliance. We're not going to talk about it for very long. It's going to be back in front of my board at their next meeting on September 26th. Ellen Roberts is going to be developing a more detail about what this loose alliance. It would include 5 or 6 entities, Club 20, the Ag Water Alliance, the Timber Products, Nature Conservancy, Water Congress, with the idea of creating some kind of loose alliance with a pointed idea of accelerating the pace and scale of restoration and management of forest activities. If we get into that, it's going to be an endangered species kind of long train running thing. There's not going to be a short run and you're going to run across the goal line, spike the ball, and say you're done. The forest health is going to be with us for a long time. The reason I asked Doug Benevento about the NEPA Act next year is the 50th anniversary of the negotiations that went into the National Environmental Policy Act. It was actually signed by President Nixon on January 1st of 1970. And the idea here that we are, this is probably a good time as we're looking at the 50th year of NEPA to start maybe a conversation about, is NEPA working for us? And at our board retreat that we did back in June, one of the things the Water Congress board did, they spent a good hour just venting about the frustrations on how long it's taking to get permitting done when we've got things like NIST being delayed at a cost of $2 million a month for every month of delay. I don't know. It just seems to me that NEPA is really not working very well when it takes so long to get permits done. So we have these huge overarching issues, and at the federal level, at the state level, we've gotten pretty used to a governor that's been very engaged with the water community, more so than probably any governor since Steve McNichols, in my opinion. That in fact you've probably had Governor Hickenlooper at more of our events, and that's not exactly true, but of all the previous governors combined, it's been almost that much. And so I think you can kind of pick up from the comments that I heard of the last couple of days. You're probably going to have a next administration may not have water quite as high on their priority list as Governor Hickenlooper had. We'll also have Attorney General's office, a number of very important issues there, from interstate negotiations to Amendment 71, and this is going to be an interesting ballot season between Initiative 97, the 2,500-foot setback for fracking, and the 108 on the taking, saying about if any government, state or local government, passes a regulation and reduces some of the fair market value of the property. Those are pretty big deals. On top of that, for a lot of our local providers and our districts, the effect of Gallagher coming up is going to be a big issue. How Tabor and other things also interact with that will be significant. For the Water Congress, staff-wise, we're going to be, as soon as we get done with this conference, we're going to be looking at long last at adding a communications staff person on. So we have 3 staff, and Meg and Chanae do an excellent job. And we'll thank them at brunch here when we get more people in the room. But we're going to need to get some more staff on in terms of communications. We did a member satisfaction survey back in 2015, and I think we had like 91, 92% satisfaction with the amount and of our communications. I still think, though, which is higher than I would have rated us, and so we'll need to put more effort into communication. So I'm looking forward to that, and should be by the time we get to our annual event, we'll have another communication staff person in place. The next thing that we're looking at right now is this kind of so if you kind of look at how the organization is developed, Gordon Shears spent a lot of his time just on getting the association going, doing the monthly newsletter, and doing this as best he could with as a part-time employee. Dick McCravey, who came on in 1980 and ran the organization for almost 26 years, our longest-serving executive director, really put a lot of energy into the legislature and that working relationship, and we are continuing to reap the fruits of what he had planted back in 1980 when he came on. And the track record we have, the idea that we have a breakfast now every year with the Interim Water Resources Review Committee, the fact that we've got them here every year, and just the way their presence at our state affairs meetings has really been something. So we've certainly we've kind of got the organization started under Scheer. We've spent a lot of time on under McCravey on spending time building our legislative relationships. Under Kemper, one of the first things that my board said to me is we need to build conferences and put more energy into that. And your response on those has been really fantastic, and these have been just fun to do because of the energy that comes from you as much as anything else. So these things are fun to do. People often ask me won't you be glad when these things are done? And to me, it's a little bit like Christmas. You kind of look forward to it in a lot of ways. About 3 weeks ahead, you're going, God, I can't wait for this to be done. But when you're into it, it's a lot of fun. And this afternoon when you walk out, it's a little kind of after like Christmas. is. Yeah. So again, we had a huge jump in attendance for this event. I think right around 350 registered. So, and if you take a look at the badges over there, they're still left there. Almost all the ones that are sitting there were speakers that didn't pick up their badges. But the idea that the amount of no-shows compared to other organizations, it's like I think you can count them on almost one hand out of that 350. It's phenomenal. So this room has been packed for I know it's a little early this morning, but this room has been packed the whole time, and I really appreciate your attendance here. One of the things that I'm not as happy with is our workshops, and so we're going to be putting some time and energy into that. I get these comments from, oh, we've got too many different things competing, and even this year we had a ton of people in the Colorado River stuff, but we didn't have as many in the others, and so we need to give a little more thought to how we're doing the workshops and how many is too many, and how we're doing those. So that'll be a project for me this fall. The other thing is that we've had Peter Levish, who is going to be helping us with looking at our education training framework that we have, and he's just started on that. He has developed a sign-up sheet, which we'll have posted over there at the registration desk, with some ideas that you might want to see covered in technical sessions. And so there's some ideas here. You can kind of put a tally if you're interested in those, and then there's space here for you to see if you agree with those, so we can get some kind of feel for that. We'll do a survey on this. Expect another member survey this fall. The board has tentatively gone ahead and approved that, so we'll be working on that. But just figuring out where we're going with this, training, education, mentoring kind of thing, and helping to bring the new generation in, and keeping the folks that have been around this organization for a long time, and opening those doors to where continuing to work on breaking down those silos. I think the Pond has done an excellent job on starting that. You heard from Joe Frank on that yesterday, but so but we need to continue to work on that. I was really thrilled with when we did the survey on the age distribution. I was almost dead even, and that's something that we all should feel pretty good about. But getting the new folks, finding a place for them to get involved. There's plenty of space for them to do so. So we're looking forward to that. So we're running a little tight on time here. I want to make sure we stay on schedule. Representative Diane Mitz-Bush is here, and I want to introduce her. But so thank you again for being here at the breakfast. I know it's early, and we've got, I think, another fun morning. I'm really looking forward to it. And if you have any questions or stuff, catch me in the hall or send me an email.